Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have the ELD Legacy Open Championship, September 17th. Rob on Death's Shadow, Grixis, having access to so many great cards. Sam going with a Jeskai Delver build, so both players able to have a wide variety of options rather than kind of keeping it narrowly focused like a red Delver, for example. Now, Death's Shadow does run Steam Vents, Watery Graves, the Shocklands, actually decrease your own life total. Have to be a little careful of that versus Delver. I don't think I've ever played a match of Shadow where I felt I made every decision correctly. Pretty much always going to be some decision point where it's like, was it correct to take damage there? Should I have? Should I not have? And here we have a Thoughtseize. Going to make some of Rob's decisions much easier once he has perfect information. And not a bad hand at all here. We got Lightning Bolt, Swords to Plowshares, Prismatic Ending. Swords to Plowshares, very notable in this matchup, and it can reset the life total. You can never really commit two Death Shadows to the board when it runs Swords to Plowshares, unless you have just overwhelming backup. Because if they Swords to Plowshares one Death Shadow, the other one is always going to die. A little bit similar with Murktide Regent. Of course, if you have a Death Shadow already out and your Murktide's big enough, then potentially losing both to a single Swords to Plowshares is going to be just far too much damage for one mana. Swords around since the beginning. Swords there from Sam. To stick a Delver of Secrets. Rob's already at 12, thanks to paying all sorts of life, and now Snuff Out, using even more life. Such a incredible Magic card. Sees a bunch of Pauper play as well. Recently lost a match of Pauper thanks to Snuff Out, breaking up a creature-based combo. I mean, it's free creature removal. Only thing better than that one mana Swords to Plowshares. You know, free is a lot less than one. Especially when you're talking about multiple instances or in the same turn playing two copies, though 8 life can be quite a lot to pay. Certainly better than just losing, though. Now we have an opposing Murktide. Force Pitching Days. Oof, and it sticks. That is very rough. Force of Will, the glue that holds the format together. Here, very skill-intensive card, giving players the potential to put their foot down and say no to an opposing card. Of course, it's at the cost of 2 cards from your hand, and Murktide's certainly worth that, especially when low on life. Storming back into it. That Expressive Iteration on the other side already helpful in recouping the card disadvantage from Force of Will. Iteration, one of the most powerful cards that have been brought to us in the last couple of years. Like Rob, gonna commit a Baleful Strix to the board as well. 7 all, threatening lethal. Knows there's potentially a Lightning Bolt on the other side, so this Baleful Strix not necessarily, well, now it will deal damage, deal lethal. Down to 4. Another bolt. Down to 1. Hoping to get another burn spell, and he doesn't have it. That is a wrap. Look at that, just 1 point of life. Lightning Bolt, really important in this matchup, as I alluded to earlier. You do need to be careful. We saw just 1 point of life was the difference there, as those 2 bolts could have totally swung that in the other direction. Rob had paid just 1 more point of life somewhere. Fetching, letting a land come into play, untapped with a Watery Grave or Steam Vents unnecessarily. Extra Thoughtseize, Force of Will. I mean, it's just So many different ways that you can pay life in this deck, which is great for growing your Death Shadows, but you do need to be very, very aware of what your opponent might be able to do. And even still at the end there, Sam had a live draw forward an extra burn spell. It's like Rob's good on 7. We see a Fatal Push in hand, along with a Hydroblast. Look not to get overwhelmed in the early game. Land takes out a land, but quickly replaced. All right, another one, though. Wasteland in multiples can really throw a... I'm not sure what metaphor to use there. It can be an absolute train wreck. Sometimes you keep, 2 or 3 lander, and it seems totally fine. And if those first few lands get wastelanded, find yourself in a non-game, unable to interact at all. Sam's deck, resilient so far here, allowing him to ponder and shuffle, trying to find perhaps more land, maybe a threat. We'll see what he actually is in need of. Thoughtseize from Rob is again going to give him just the best information, and whew, what a spicy looking hand here. Look at that. Force Days, Hydroblast, Swords to Plowshares, all the answers in the world. Maddening Hex is the curse, and that's the call. A win condition on its own, 3 mana. Whenever the enchanted player casts a non-creature spell, they roll a d6, take that much damage. Last line, irrelevant here, is you only have one opponent. Then you attach Maddening Hex to another one of your opponents at random, but no opponents to attach to. Gonna stay put. Strix beating down. Not really where you want to be. But sometimes that's just the way you need to do it. 17, let the beatings commence. Both players with just tons of answers. There's really no answering a Baleful Strix, aside from countering it on the stack. We see a Pyroblast stopping Expressive Iteration, and a Delver of Secrets. This might be able to trade with the Baleful Strix. That's kind of your best case scenario. Delver flipping and working on defense. Baleful chips in again. Just 16 more turns of this and we'll be all set. Rob fetching. And if he gets a shock, he'll have Death Shadows online. Looks like he's content to play a slightly slower game here so far. Murktide. Now that is a clock. That'll wrap things up very quickly. Comes in with just a couple of counters. And a Swords to Plowshares. Going to attempt to remove the huge body on the other side, which it does. A couple of Snuff Outs, a Pyroblast, a Red Blast. Another damage coming in. Mystic Sanctuary, able to get back Expressive Iteration. Hydroblast thrown at Expressive. It's both red and blue, so either blast will work against it. Love that old Foglio art. A red Elemental Blast, not a Pyro. Reb. Around since the beginning of the game in the original alpha. The alpha actually has a fun misprint on it. It says instant instead of interrupt. Back then, interrupt was kind of like split second. Spells resolved in batches. Once an interrupt was on the stack, you couldn't spawn with any more instants. They were just at a different speed level. So Pyroblast back in the day didn't really work correctly until the beta version. Well, I should say didn't work as printed until the beta version. We have a Ponder. Another Ponder. Yeah, this Baleful Strix keeps chipping away. It's kind of what you want to do with Delvers in general, is like you land a threat and you just keep attacking each turn as the game goes on until eventually your opponent stops moving. But I guess in this case, we're doing it 1 point at a time. Rob milking the hammer time a bit. Gotta respect it. Full grip of 7. Actually, 8. He's got to discard a Fatal Push. That's not going to feel great on the other side of the table there. You're a creature deck trying to establish a board presence, and your opponent has so much removal that they're discarding Fatal Push. You got to imagine your first Delver's probably not going to stick around for very long. Dragon Rage Channeler, same boat. Unable to Thoughtseize. No black mana right now, just a Mystic Sanctuary, a Steam Vents. Cut off of black mana currently. There's the fetch land. Thoughtseize previously discarded. And I got to imagine this is going to be used. Not a lot of reason why you'd want to just play that fetch land and crack it, opening yourself up to Wasteland. Towards the Plowshares finally takes out that Baleful Strix. Interesting. I mean, that's the type of thing that I was referring to earlier. I doubt that Rob would stand by the decision to crack that fetch land there. If I had to guess, getting your Watery Grave onto the battlefield, not super helpful when you didn't end up utilizing it. A Brainstorm with a fetch land on board. A more precise play might have been waiting to sacrifice that fetch land. We'll see. Rob will see the video and share his thoughts as well, but just watching this through at double speed, my initial impression. The beatings continue with Baleful Strix. Down to 5. And this second bird, picking up that first bird's legacy, but I mean, this has been a lot of damage. Death Shadow, that threatens to just close this right out. So it's the Plowshares. We have a Stubbs to protect it. Stubborn Denial. Hardcast Daze. And then returning a land to Daze. So Death Shadow is kept off the board, but this Baleful Strix persists, just continuing the careful application of violence. A Lightning Bolt gets the bird out of there. Rob's going to need to find another way to close this out. Oh, another bird. Look at that. Just bird tribal here. Sam pondering. I mean, he might actually lose the Baleful Strix here, but like the real problem with Baleful Strix is if you're using spot removal on it, you're not actually answering Baleful Strix. You're stopping the body, but they've already drawn a card off of it. Where you really want to be against a card like Baleful Strix is Pyroblasting it while it's on the stack, completely shutting it down. And once they've drawn the card, that's really the primary reason for it to be in there. The fact that it furthers your game plan, and of course can trade with a removal spell or one of your opponent's creatures. All sorts of counters here. We've got an Expressive Iteration, some Elemental Blasts back and forth, and now a Spell Pierce to close the deal. And Expressive will be stopped. Sam down to just 3 cards in hand, 3 points of life. Oh, finally. Murktide. A huge Murktide. However, this Baleful Strix. Oh, no. This Baleful Strix can keep it back. We have a Snuff Out. Sam forces himself down to 2 life, and now a second Snuff Out. Down to just 1. A Death Shadow joins in. Draws a card, and that is it. Wow. I mean, it wasn't the same Baleful Strix, but it kind of went coast to coast there. At the end, Sam was actually at 1 with a Baleful Strix to take him out. Death Shadow would have taken some of the credit there, but really, I think we all know who the MVP was that matchup.